Hello everyone. It's been a while. I changed camera system. I'm no longer using Panasonic and instead I'm using Fujifilm. So today we're going to talk a little bit about Fuji cameras. And there's probably going to be many videos about Fuji cameras coming up ahead. Probably going to be quite a lot of camera content coming up as well. Question that often pops up when someone is considering a Fujifilm camera is, which camera should I get? Depends a little bit on your budget, depends on what you're shooting and stuff like that. But there is two cameras that people are often considered because they are pretty similar. Those two cameras are the X-pro3 and the XT4. I happen to have both and I have been using both of the cameras, so I know quite a lot about these cameras. This is not a technical review. If you want the technical aspects of these two cameras, I would probably recommend you to check out one of all those videos that has that point of view on YouTube. Anyway, to just quickly go through the technical specification, both cameras has the same X-trans sensor on 26 megapixels. They are basically the same camera in different packages. The XT4, however, has better video features and it has an IBIS. That's the only difference, more or less. So, which one should you get? Well, if you're doing a lot of street photography, it's obvious you should get the X-pro3. It has that classical rangefinder look, and it's pretty low key. A lot of people think this is an analog camera because Fujifilm cameras has these analog dials. There's like dials that you turn to change shutter time, and there's even a knob that you pull out to turn in order to change ISO, just like you did on an analog camera. However, that's nothing unique for the X-pro3. The XT4 has the same. Even better, it has a separate dial here on the left side for the ISO. You just turn it and you change the ISO. So it means you could set this camera up to 1/1000th of a second on ISO 1600 and an aperture of 4, because this camera, or like the lens, has an aperture ring, like all cameras should have. And like some of the newer expensive Sony lenses starting to get now, well, lenses always had it, so why would you remove it? That's a freaking mystery. However, if you're doing like a lot of like nature stuffs and you're like getting low to your things you're taking pictures of, flowers perhaps, and stuff like that, the display on this camera could be pretty useful because it's a flip out display, which means you could get really low and you could still see the display in order to be laying on the ground. Same goes if you're shooting fashion and people and you often shoot from very low angles. This allows you to see the display. The X-pro3, however, has a slightly controversial design. Doesn't have a flip-out display. I'm not a big fan of the flip-out displays, but some people like it. I actually like the tilt displays much more, like the GFX have. You just like tilt it out and you could easily see the display. What's nice with this kind of display is that it doesn't fold out on the side and makes everything much wider. Especially if you're shooting film and you're actually spending more time behind the camera than holding the camera and shooting yourself. Then it's much better with the tilting display, because when you rigged up the camera, it doesn't matter if it tilts out, because you won't be able to tilt it because you're going to have an HDMI, you're going to have a power delivery, and you're going to have the microphone jack, and all those cables are going to be in a way for the display to be a tilt. So I often end up having the display like this when I'm standing behind the camera with all those things connected to the camera. Yeah, and of course I forgot to show the display on the X-pro3. The display on the X-pro3 is freaking perfect. It's always hidden. It has this tiny little display that are totally useless, basically, but it's pretty cute and it shows what film simulation you are in. However, you could get some extra information on this that could actually be useful. However, this display is not backlit, so you would not be able to see what it actually shows in way too many situations. And the information it shows in those modes are actually very visible on the top, because it basically shows like stuff like maybe white balance, aperture, shutter time, and stuff like that. But the thing is that you are folding out the display like this, so it pulls out in the bottom. So you are probably not going to run around and shooting with the display open like this, and you're probably not going to look on the display every time you took a picture. And if you want to get higher and take a picture with it, you have to hold the camera upside down in order to see what you are shooting. And if you want to get really, really low and shoot like this, you don't see the display at all. However, if you're doing it in landscape, you see the display perfectly fine. But if you're putting it on a tripod, it could sometimes be a little bit complicated to turn this display. But well, it's a freaking perfect design because you don't see it. I'm very serious about this display. It's a freaking perfect display. And the whole design is freaking perfect. I freaking love it. It's the main reason why I bought this camera, because many times when I'm working with the cameras, even if I'm working with the XT4, I often end up with the display hidden away because I don't want to see it. I don't have any reason to see it. I trust the light meter. I trust myself to visualize what I'm shooting and see the picture that I'm shooting. I don't need to see it in this display, and especially I don't just want to take up the camera, take a picture, have a look on it, and then think about, okay, what don't I like with this picture and what do I want to do different. I want to see something ahead of me, and I want to think about what I'm seeing and considering what do I want to show in this scene? What do I want to make a picture of? That's a big difference. That's how I want to work. And this camera is providing these possibilities in a very nice way. In a way that, well, this one's not really doing, because you kind of have it there, so you're taking a picture and you're gonna look down on it. That's just how it is. So in that sense, both the X-pro3 and the XT4 are providing the same possibilities. So it's nothing unique for the X-pro3. It's the package, the shape, the size, the look of the rangefinder look is what appeals to this camera. But to sum it up quickly, because we're not going to make this video long, if you're shooting film and film is something that you prioritize, the XT4 is the way to go. If film is nothing that you care about, the X-pro3 is the way to go. If you care about all those things that I mentioned before, like low angles and stuff like that, the XT4 is something to consider. However, if you want a camera that is ridiculously fun to shoot with, a camera that gives you a very nice feeling, and a camera that gives you a bigger smile on your lips, the X-pro3 is the way to go. The X-pro3 is a fun camera to work with. The XT4 is a tool to work with that does the job. When I bought my XT4, the main reason why I bought this instead of the X-pro3, which I actually wanted more than this one, is because of the film features. So I bought this one together with a kit lens. The kit lens I went with was the 18 to 55 millimeter. It has a 2.8 aperture that is variable. So if you zoom in, it goes up to 4. Well, considering that Fuji makes 2 other zoom lenses, well, maybe more, but 2 other worth mentioning, it's the 16 to 50 or 55. One of them has an aperture of 4, the other one has an aperture of 2.8 over the whole zoom range. This one is the compromise in between. You could easily put it on aperture 4 and it's very similar to the other one that has an aperture 4 and you still have a 2.8 on 18 millimeter. However, one of the reasons why I consider this lens, well, first of all, it's pretty cheap to get and you get a zoom. The second reason was that the focus pull on this camera or on this lens is pretty smooth. So, for example, if you move forward like this and backwards, the focus pull from this lens gonna be pretty smooth, just like you saw, just like now. The difference is now I'm shooting with the Sony A7S3 with a 24 to 70 2.8 G master. Sony is by no doubt the leading manufacturer when it comes to autofocus, but the Fuji is kind of good enough. I would say that the hardware in these cameras are up to the task. However, the software is lacking behind a little bit. One example for that is if you're shooting a situation like this, it's going to track your eye very well. And depending on how you move forward or backwards, sideways, it's still going to track you. However, if you're turning your profile like this, it's going to lose you. And what's going to happen is that it's going to pick up the background instead. The Sony, however, doesn't do that. Well, maybe sometimes, but generally it doesn't. I fell into the Fuji system for one reason. I wondered if medium format cameras lives up to the hype in 2022. So I got on GFX. We're not going to talk too much about that. But the thing I discovered with the GFX is that the colors of the Fujifilm cameras, they are Fujilicious. Well, the colors from the Fujifilms are just outstanding. But the XT4 I got was supposed to be a tool for making films. So I built this little rig. It has a Atomos, a Shinobi, small rig cage and some top handles and a nice wooden handle on the side so I could hold it like this. However, my idea was like, okay, I need to be able to pull out the camera and put on some strap on it and be able to do street photography with it. I did some street photography with this and it performs extremely well, but doesn't give me that smile on the lips like the X-pro3. So most times nowadays, regardless of what kind of stills I'm shooting, if I'm going somewhere, if I'm going to go travel, the X-pro3 is the camera I bring with me. If I'm going to do something that are film, well, the XT4 is the camera that I bring. And I kitted this up pretty well. I have this small rig here, the cage. Just put the camera in here and turn this screw in the bottom. And the cage comes with this handy little tool, so you could just like attach it there so it's safely here. the Fuji camera is kind of up to the task when it comes to film. It shoots in 10-bit 4:0. It's pretty good. If you shoot externally though to an Atomos Ninja, you can get 10-bit 4:2 colors. So you kind of have all the room in the codec in order to shoot with this. However, it's a camera with compromises when it comes to the video. There's some good stuffs and there's some compromises. Overall, it's a good camera. In order to switch between video mode and still mode, there's just a simple switch on the knob over there. And as you just saw, rigging this one up and getting it into the cage, well, it's pretty simple. Didn't take too long. And the whole idea with this one is that I take this Peak Design strap and I simply attach it onto this one, and the other one goes here, and now I can hold all of the rig on my shoulder. And if I'm shooting, I don't need to spend all my energy to holding the camera. If I have a manual lenses, I can easily pull focus manually. I could change the display in whichever way I want. I can handhold it. So I have a lot of versatility with this one. The image stabilizer on the XT4 is pretty good. And it has a boost mode, so it kind of looks like you're having a tripod. But this is, by no doubt, the camera that I love. This is the tool that I like to work with. But to be honest, Panasonic is not Panasonic. To be honest, Sony is still the king when it comes to shooting video. The A7S3 is the king of video. The A7 IV is probably pretty good too. Doesn't lack some of the low light capability that the A7S3 has and some of the slow-mo things. But the autofocus is just like spot on. You can trust it in all situations. It does the job really good. It's a workhorse. And as mentioned before, and some of you might know, I used to own a Panasonic S5. That camera is a pretty good camera. The video specs on that camera, it's very good. It has all the specifications. It has shutter angles. It has the anamorphic crop. It can output RAW, not only ProRes RAW, but also Blackmagic RAW through the HDMI, depending what the recorder you have. So could the A7S. The difference, however, is that the A7S3 costs like almost $2,000 more. So where do this one sit in all this? Well, Fuji is Fuji. Kind of, I don't think you're buying a Fujifilm camera for amazing specs or stuff like that. You buy a Fujifilm camera because what it provides and the feeling it gives is on another level. It's nice to work with, and the colors, that's what you basically buy. The Fujifilm color, that's why you buy color. You buy the Fujifilm because of the colors. Well, and you buy the X-pro3 because of the form and because it's an amazing camera and because you can't see the display when you're actually working with it and because it has this tiny little display that is a cute little gimmick that shows what film simulation you have. And the film simulations are basically Fuji taking all their knowledge of creating analog film and putting all that knowledge into the digital package, and that's why you get the Fujilicious color. So I hope this video helped you out, which one you should buy, if you should buy the X-pro3 or if you should buy the XT4. Well, the most reasonable thing to buy is, of course, to buy the X-pro3, then you buy an XT4, then you realize how nice they are, so you realize that you need a medium format that lives up to the hype. Medium format, it's so freaking delicious to work with, no doubt. But then your wife also realized that, damn, this colors has nice colors and I want to shoot some pictures, so you end up with an old Fuji X100T that only has 16 megapixels, but because Fuji are doing amazing cameras, it still keeps up with today's cameras without any issues. So all of a sudden you're sitting here at home and you have 4 Fujifilm cameras that does an amazing job, and you have a big bunch of vintage lenses that you could put on, well, most of them, but not this one because it has the fixed lens. But on all of these you could use the vintage lenses, and the results you're getting is just like If you like this kind of content, you should click on the playlist that's going to be up there. It has more camera related content, and I would definitely recommend you to subscribe to this channel if you want to see more camera related content. That every once in a while there's no cameras, there's cars and all kind of weird stuff that might not interest you, but if a little bit of the content I'm do interests you, well, subscribe. Thanks for watching.